Okay, so imagine this. Etched into the landscape, hidden in plain sight across the massive deserts of the Middle East are these enormous, mysterious structures. I mean, for thousands of years they've been right there, but they're so huge you can only really see them from the sky. Today, we're decoding these ancient megastructures, better known as the desert kites.
So the big question, right off the bat, is what exactly are these things? The scale is just immense. The design is clearly deliberate, and honestly, for about a century, they have been a huge puzzle for archaeologists. What in the world were they for?
We're talking about these low stone walls that snake across the desert for miles, eventually funneling into these massive enclosures. You know, they were first spotted by pilots way back in the 1920s, who actually gave them the name desert kites, because the shape kind of reminded them of a kid's toy. A pretty simple name for what turned out to be a really complex mystery.
Yeah, so for the longest time, our entire understanding of these kites was, well, literally from a bird's eye view, and that distance led to a whole century of speculation about what they could possibly be.
You know, the early theories were all over the map. Some people thought, hey, maybe these are Roman defenses. Others suggested they were some kind of elaborate ritual site. The idea that they were a type of animal pen or trap was also on the table. But without anyone on the ground doing real fieldwork, these were all just educated guesses.
And here's where it gets really wild. Just 20 years ago, we only knew about a few hundred of these kites. But now, thanks to modern satellite imagery, researchers have cataloged over 6,600 of them. They stretch all the way from Saudi Arabia to Kazakhstan. We're talking about a colossal continent-spanning network of megastructures. So, with thousands of kites finally on the map, the next step was to really decode them. And you know, the first question you have to ask about any ancient structure is, just how old is it? As it turns out, the answer would change everything. Now, the problem was, there wasn't any organic material like wood or charcoal around for traditional carbon dating. So scientists had to get clever. They used this technique called optically stimulated luminescence, or OSL. It basically lets them figure out the last time a grain of sand inside the structure saw sunlight, which gives them a pretty precise date for when it was built. Pretty smart, right? And the results were just staggering. The kites date back to around 7,000 B.C.E. Now, to put that into perspective, that means they are thousands of years older than Stonehenge, and they predate the first Egyptian pyramids by a huge margin. These are, without a doubt, some of the oldest large-scale structures ever built by humans. So if they're that old, what were they being used for? Well, the answer started to take shape when archaeologists finally began to excavate on site. This quote from zoo archaeologist Cheryl Macarici really captures the shock of what they found. It wasn't empty desert at all, but an unbelievable density of artifacts. All this new evidence started pointing in one very clear direction. These kites weren't just random structures. They were incredibly sophisticated, highly engineered hunting machines. Now, to understand how they worked, you have to completely forget the desert landscape you're picturing today. Geologists have confirmed that 9,000 years ago, this region was a much wetter, greener world. We're talking lush riverbanks, more vegetation, a place that could support vast herds of wildlife, the perfect hunting ground.
So how did this brilliant trap actually work? Well, those long walls, sometimes stretching for miles, would act as a giant funnel for herds of animals. The builders were absolute geniuses. They used the natural landscape, like breaks in a slope, to hide the final enclosure and the deep pit traps at the end. The animals would be running full speed into the enclosure, and by the time they realized they were trapped, it was way too late.
And what exactly were they hunting with all this incredible effort? Well, after analyzing thousands and thousands of bone fragments from the pits, the answer was just overwhelming. A staggering 99.9% of the bones belonged to gazelle. These weren't just traps, they were mass gazelle hunting machines. Okay, so we know what the kites were, and we know how mind-bogglingly old they are. But the biggest question of all was still out there. Who built them? And the answer turned out to be a major breakthrough. So near a whole cluster of kites in Jordan, archaeologists found the one thing they'd been searching for decades: human settlements. The unique tools, the architecture, and the clear, undeniable connection to the kites revealed a previously unknown Neolithic people, who the researchers have now named the Ghassanian culture. And the excavations painted this incredible picture of a really sophisticated society. The Ghassanians lived in these cool, circular huts that were partly underground. They were master flint knappers, and they even found seashells from the Red Sea, which shows they were part of a bigger trade network.
And crucially, they clearly lived communally, which makes sense. You'd need a whole community to process the hundreds of gazelles from a single hunt.
But the most astonishing discovery that was yet to come, something that reveals a level of planning and abstract thought that is completely rewriting a chapter of human history.
While excavating the Ghassanian settlements, the team found several of these large, flat stones with really detailed carvings on them. At first, they just looked like some kind of decoration, but the archaeologists pretty quickly started to suspect they might be something way more significant. So the question became, was this just some ancient art, or was it something more? Could these intricate carvings actually be a plan, a blueprint for the colossal structures they built right next door?
And when you put them side by side, the answer is just undeniable. The engraved stone clearly shows the funneling lines and the pits at the end, a design that is a near-perfect match to the satellite image of the actual kite. This wasn't art, it was architecture.
And this wasn't just a hunch either. Researchers used computer programs to mathematically compare the plans to the real-world structures. The result? As high as an 81% similarity. I mean, even after 9,000 years of erosion, the link was mathematically proven.
The significance of this is it's just hard to overstate. As lead archaeologist Remy Crissard says, these are the oldest known scale plans in human history. The previous record holders were from Mesopotamia, but these Ghassanian plans predate them by an incredible 5,000 years.
And if that wasn't mind-blowing enough, they also found something else, little 3D models of the kites, carved from stone. Inside these models, they found collected fossils and other curious objects, which suggest the kites weren't just about hunting. They were deeply woven into the Ghassanians' spiritual and cultural lives.
So the desert kites went from being this mystery etched on the landscape to a testament to a forgotten, truly ingenious people. It just proves that there is so much we still don't know. And it leaves you wondering, what other secrets of our ancestors are still out there, just hidden in plain sight, waiting for us to find a new way to see them?